Okay, so it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to the joint Dufferin County Candidate Information Session. Today you will be hearing a presentation by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Our presenters for today are Carol Sauvé. She is a French designated municipal advisor with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Concordia University in Montreal and has been with the Ontario Public Service for over 20 years, working as a corporate trainer, advisor, and customer service representative. Caitlin Reddick is a municipal advisor with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. She has been with the Ontario Public Service for 6 years as a policy analyst and an assistant planner with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Caitlin has a bachelor degree from the University of Toronto in Human Geography and City Studies. My name is Carolina Kahn. I'm the Deputy Clerk at the Town of Orangeville. I will be helping to moderate the session today. Thank you for attending. We will get right into the presentation. Just as a quick housekeeping right before we get into it is please note that any questions that you may have with respect to the presentation today will be handled at the end of the session. On the screen, you will see the number that you can call to ask any questions following the presentation and the conference ID. You can also email us at elections@orangeville.ca if you have any questions, and we can put them in the queue to be answered at the ending of the formal presentation component of tonight. So without further ado, I will put up the question contact information following the presentation. So without further ado, I will be giving the floor to Caitlin and Carol. Thank you very much for attending today.
All right. Hello, my name is Carol Sauvé, and attending along with me today from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is Caitlin Reddick. So first, I want to thank Dufferin County for inviting us and for hosting this candidate and third-party advertiser information session. So we're going to start with the first slide here, the disclaimer slide. So these slides are meant to be a summary of some of the sections, and they should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we're not lawyers and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. We're not going to be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but we hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and the legislation, as well as improve your comfort level. Congratulations for taking an interest in your community and in local government. And that's whether you're interested in serving on a municipal council or on a school board or registering as a third-party advertiser. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines some of the topics we want to cover during this session. We're going to look at the roles of elected members of council, head of council, and municipal staff, as well as the role of the school board trustee. The nomination process and how a candidate withdraws a nomination. Also, what happens if a candidate files a nomination and then changes his or her mind about which office they wish to run for. We're going to look at some key dates and who is eligible to run for municipal office and school boards and who isn't. We're going to look at general campaign rules and election finances. That's campaign spending limits, contribution limits, campaign expenses, borrowing, what expenses are exempt from the spending limit, financial surplus and deficit, financial reporting at the end of the campaign period. Also, compliance audits initiated by an application, penalties, general information about the voters list, and rules about proxy voting, rights of scrutineers at the poll, recounts, and finally, we're going to give you some resources where you can find information detailed on the second to last slide. Next slide, please. So you're considering running for municipal office. Local government is the level of government that is closest to the people, and it is the most accessible and responsive to the needs of the community. You've made a decision to throw your hat in the ring, or you're thinking about it, and you're curious to know how to go about it. Perhaps it's something you've always wanted to pursue, or you want to make a difference, or you're not happy with some of the decisions that have been made, or you simply have a passion for politics. Regardless, it's a 4-year commitment that will be filled with challenges, excitement, disappointments, hard work, and a great deal of satisfaction. Ontario municipal governments deliver local services, while the province establishes the legislative and policy framework. The Ontario government sets standards for many local services such as land use planning, building regulation, and social housing, and the province provides funding to municipalities for delivery of some services. The ministry also works in partnership with the municipal sector to support efficient and responsive local governments that are sustainable and investment ready. Local government is a challenging environment with high expectation and limited resources, doing more with less. There is a limited understanding of roles of council and staff. Government is not like other business. You can't make everyone happy. So council must make difficult decisions in the best interest of the municipality. Now, before we get into an overview of the Municipal Elections Act, we wanted to provide a brief summary of the role of elected municipal officials and the role of staff. So please note that the information about the role of council and staff and accountability and transparency, this can also be found in the Councillor's Guide on the Ministry's website. This guide is an excellent tool that can provide you with a lot more information about how municipalities operate and how council and staff can work together in the best interests of the municipality. Next slide, please. So first, let me start by saying that Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction, and each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. The Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities which seeks to balance local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. So the key to any organization, government, business, industry, or local service club is for everyone to understand their respective roles and relationships. In the next few slides, we're going to review the role of the mayor's role as the chief executive officer, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff, which are all key to an effective and efficient local government. Next slide, please. So the role of council. Section 224 of the Municipal Act states that the role of council is to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, to develop and evaluate the policies and programs of the municipality, to determine which services the municipality provides, to ensure that administrative and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council. It's also to ensure the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality. It's to maintain the financial integrity of the municipality and carry out the duties of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. So some examples of other acts are the Planning Act, the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Those are three of the more familiar pieces of legislation, but there are numerous other acts that may have sections that apply to municipalities. Next slide, please. So it's also the role of council to conduct meetings and pass bylaws. Council develops policies with respect to accountability and transparency, notice, delegation of authority, hiring, disposition of sale of land, procurement of goods and services, relationship between council and staff, protection of tree canopy and natural vegetation, pregnancy and parental leaves. So this is all done as a collective group with all members having each one vote. So next slide, please, sorry. The role of head of council. So section 225 of the Municipal Act states that it is the role of head of council to act as the chief executive officer, to preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively, to provide leadership to the council, to provide information and recommendations to council on policies, practices, procedures, to ensure transparency and accountability, to represent the municipality at official functions, and to carry out the duties of the head of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. Basically, the role of the head of council is to act as a leader. The head of council is the chair of the meetings of council and the public face of the municipality. I'm going to hand out the next slides to my colleague, Caitlin.
Thank you, Carol. So the role of head of council continued. So although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, this may be confusing to people with a business background. The head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters during a council meeting. The head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. It is important to note that council makes decisions, not an individual council member, including the head of council. To clarify, the head of council always has a vote. There's sometimes confusion on this point in the media and with the public who think that the head of council can only vote in the case of a tie. Another clarification regarding voting is refraining from voting counts as a no vote. This is spelled out specifically in legislation in the case of recorded votes. A tie loses, so the result is the same as having voted no. Next slide, please. Thank you. Staff role. So the role of staff is set out in section 227 of the Municipal Act. This would include implementing council's decisions and establish administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decisions, undertake research and provide advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, carry out duties required by legislation or other duties assigned by the municipality. And a key feature of effective and efficient councils is a well-developed understanding of the council staff relations and the role of each party. The Councilor's Guide provides a list of ways that council members can assist staff to meet council's expectations. Some include having a policy requiring comprehensive job descriptions for all staff, providing clear policy decisions, directions, and expectations, adopt policies that complement and reinforce staff efforts, consult with staff before deciding on policies, and being prepared for council meetings. Staff in turn should provide well-organized agendas with supporting materials, provide sufficient timely information and analysis to make council's decisions making easier, notify council of changes to legislation and programs, provide advice on policy, including options and recommended actions, identifying the costs and benefits for the community in human and financial terms, notify council immediately of any unintended and unexpected impacts of policy decisions, and implement council decisions as effectively and professionally as possible. As you know, there are some municipal staff positions that have statutory obligations, such as the clerk, treasurer, chief building official, and fire chief. It is important that council not interfere with the statutory obligations of those roles. For example, the clerk and treasurer's positions have statutory duties or responsibilities assigned to them under the Municipal Act or other pieces of legislation, and the Building Code Act would define statutory duties for the chief building official, and the Fire Prevention and Protection Act would define statutory duties for the fire chief. Next slide, please. Thank you. The role of Chief Administrative Officer. The Municipal Act sets out the role of Chief Administrative Officer in Section 229. A municipality may appoint a Chief Administrative Officer, CAO, who shall be responsible for exercising general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring the efficient and effective operation of the municipality and performing such duties, other duties as are assigned by the municipality. The function of the CAO within the municipality is generally akin to the role of the chief executive officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operation of the municipality. To help understand the role of the CAO in the municipality, picture an hourglass. Council is at one end and all municipal staff and department heads are at the other. The CAO is in the middle, the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass flows through. So if council wants to give direction to a specific department, the communication would flow through the CAO. Likewise, if the department wants to give information, reports, etc. to council, it too would flow through the CAO. Next slide, please. Thank you. Council staff relationship and roles. So the Counselor's Guide provides some very useful information on how council and staff can work together. The slide provides you with a high-level overview of the relationship. Councils and their administration have different roles within the municipality, but their roles have common goals and purposes. In general, it is the role of the elected council to represent the community and set out the direction and policy for the municipality, and it is the role of staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. Council generally sets the policy direction for the municipality, and staff provides the research and expert advice to help council in its decision-making process. Once council makes a decision, staff generally have the responsibility to implement the policy of council, for example, through administrating and delivering services and programs to the community. Staff and council rely on one another to move the municipality forward. Both staff and council provide leadership. Council provides political leadership, while administration provides leadership to the organization. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected, and it is important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so that they can serve the public in an effective and efficient manner. Municipalities are required to adopt a policy on the relationship between members of council and municipal staff. Municipalities have the flexibility to determine the content of these policies. Next slide, please. Thank you. The representative role. The next few slides will provide a bit more information on each of the roles of council as described in the Counselor's Guide. In your role as a representative, you are elected by your constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent all of them all of the time. For many issues, you will have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that will not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on the best interests of the municipality as a whole. In practice, there's no single correct approach to the representative role, and on many issues, you may find that you fall somewhere between the two opposing viewpoints. Be sure to familiarize yourself with any policies or protocols that your municipality may have in place regarding the handling of complaints and citizen inquiries. Although you may want to find some way of helping, remember to consult municipal staff. If your municipality doesn't have a complaint policy, council may want to consider adopting one. Furthermore, there may be circumstances where decisions are made by designated staff that operate at arm's length from the municipality and where it could be inappropriate for elected officials to interfere or be seen to be interfering. Examples of this would include decisions made by the fire chief, chief building official, or the medical officer of health. A councillor who has made promises that cannot be kept may lose credibility with the citizens and strain the working relationship with staff. As I mentioned before, each individual council member has one vote when making decisions. Every member of council should vote on matters in the best interest of the municipality as a whole. and every member should respect each other's points of view during and after debating an issue at the council table. Once a decision is made by council, it is the decision of the municipality, and staff are required to carry out and implement that decision. Next slide, please. Thank you. Policymaking rules. So some council decisions are routine and others establish general principles to help guide future actions. Those are often considered policy decisions. Some policies can be specific, such as a bylaw requiring dogs to be kept on leashes in public areas, and others can be broader and more general, such as approval of an official plan. How is policy made? Well, this slide outlines the general process undertaken during the policymaking role. The Counselor's Guide does provide a lot of detail on the policymaking process, but I'll provide a high-level overview. You start by identifying the issue. As council, you agree on what the issue is and what the objectives are. And council would then direct staff to research the issue further and identify and recommend options to council. There may be the need to consult with the public and consider their feedback, and council would then review staff information and consider factors such as demands on time to implement the policy, any cost implications, and etc. Council makes a decision on the best course of action and adopts the policy. From there, staff is directed to implement the policy. After the policy is implemented, council would work with staff to evaluate the policy and make any amendments that may be required. In practice, policy making is sometimes less orderly than what appears on the slide because of various factors, such as oftentimes there's rapidly changing environment. The issue facing you could be complex, or it could be difficult to single out problems that require more immediate action and attention. There could be differing and sometimes strongly held views by stakeholders and members of council. There could be legal and financial implications limiting what council may do. And lastly, the implementation of policy along with the establishment of monitoring and evaluating mechanisms may be complex. To recap, council is the primary policy-making body of the municipality, while administrative staff is responsible for carrying out council's policy decisions. The two roles are distinct, but there can be much overlap. Although staff is responsible for implementing a policy, council may wish to develop appropriate reporting mechanisms to help ensure that the policies are being carried out as intended and as effectively as possible so that council can follow implementation progress. Next slide, please. Thank you. Stewardship role. So council's objectives are to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. There's a fine line between council's overall stewardship of the municipality and the administration's management of day-to-day activities. Generally, council monitors the implementation of its approved policies and programs, but the practical aspects of its implementation and administration are a staff responsibility. Essentially, the day-to-day operations of the municipality are left up to the staff. To be effective in the stewardship role, council may wish to have processes in place to help ensure that policies adopted by council are being implemented, staff are administrating services and programs as council intended, rules and regulations are being applied correctly and consistently, and funds are being spent only as authorized, and the municipality's resources such as finance and otherwise are being used appropriately and as efficiently as possible. Establishing and following such policies and guidelines helps council leave the day-to-day details for staff to manage, and council is freer to deal with exceptional situations and ensure that policies are current and listen to issues raised by the public to represent the broader community interests. Before council can monitor and measure the municipality's administrative effectiveness and efficiency, it may wish to become familiar with policies currently in place. With input from municipal staff, council can determine whether the policies are functioning well or if changes are necessary. Next slide, please. Thank you. Accountability and transparency. So Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislative accountability and transparency framework that includes rules for municipalities and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act. and is a priority in maintaining public trust. Councillors are, of course, accountable to the public as elected officials. However, it is also important that procedures and policies are clearly set out and accessible, and that the day-to-day operations of the municipality are transparent. The slide outlines policies and that council are required to adopt. Next slide, please. Thank you. Codes of conduct. So codes of conduct generally set out expectations and standards for councillor conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of council's term. With the growing importance of accountability and integrity, more municipalities have adopted codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. Some have also adopted other procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of these members. Municipalities are required to establish codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which must include certain subject matters. These would include gifts, benefits, and hospitality, respectful conduct, including towards officers and employees of the municipality or of local boards, confidential information, and lastly, use of municipal or local board property and equipment. Now I'll hand it off to my colleague Carol to continue.
Hi there. All right, next slide, please. So accountability officers. Municipalities are required to provide access to an integrity commissioner. An integrity commissioner operates independent of council and reports to council with respect to the application of a code of conduct of members of council and local boards. It also, the integrity commissioner reports on the procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members of council and local board. The integrity commissioner also functions may also include providing advice and education about the code and other ethical rules to members of council and the public, as well as conducting inquiries into requests from council or a local board, a member of council or board, or a member of the public about whether a member of council or local board has contravened the applicable code of conduct. If the integrity commissioner reports that, in their opinion, a member of council has contravened the code of conduct, the municipality may impose a penalty in the form of a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period of up to 90 days. It is up to the municipality to decide how to proceed after the integrity commissioner's report. So to help ensure integrity and accountability in public office, the Municipal Act provides municipalities with authority to appoint certain integrity and accountability type officers. So these includes municipal ombudsman. This officer's function is to investigate in an independent manner decisions and recommendations made and actions done or omitted in the course of the administration of a municipality, local boards, or certain municipal corporations, as the municipality specifies. This is a separate office from the Ontario Ombudsman, who also has a role with respect to municipalities. The Auditor General may assist Council in holding itself and municipal administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and achieving value for money in municipal operations. The Auditor General must also perform his or her duties in an independent manner. The Auditor General's responsibility do not include the responsibilities of the municipal auditor. So municipalities also, if they wish, they may appoint a lobbyist registry and registrar and a registration system. This is such as establishing a code of conduct for lobbyists and prohibiting former public office holders from lobbying for a specified time period. Next slide, please. So the Ontario Ombudsman. The Ontario Ombudsman has had a role with respect to municipality. This role builds on the local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. This role is in addition to the Ontario Ombudsman's role as the default meeting investigator for municipalities that have not appointed a local meeting investigator. The Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received on the Ombudsman's own initiative. Although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to Council and the municipality as part of their report. It is up to the municipality whether and how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. It is also up to the Ombudsman how to respond to complaints. So, for example, the Ontario Ombudsman's practice is to investigate complaints made to local integrity officers, for example, a local ombudsman, only after the local complaint processes are completed. The Ontario Ombudsman does not replace locally established complaint mechanisms or act as an integrity commissioner for municipalities. Local integrity officers and municipal codes of conduct are an important part of Ontario's local accountability framework. Certain local boards, for example, the Police Services Board and Children's Aid Societies, may be exempted from the Ontario Ombudsman's oversight. For more information, see Ontario Regulation 114.15 under the Ombudsman Act and the legislation generally. If you wish to have more information on the Ontario Ombudsman, including its processes, please see the Ombudsman Act and the Ontario Ombudsman's website. Next slide, please. So, privacy and confidentiality. Personal privacy and other confidentiality issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councillors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out rules for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. According to these rules, councillors and staff, in most circumstances, protect personal privacy and only collect, use, and disclose personal information in accordance with those rules. For example, depending on circumstances, councillors and staff may or may not be authorized to obtain personal information in the course of their duties. This might mean that at times, councillors could not obtain this kind of information from staff. Municipal Freedom of Information legislation also regulates confidential information of other kinds. That's in addition to personal information. Other laws, including local bylaws, also regulate personal and other kinds of confidential information. Councillors who may have received personal or other confidential information in the course of their duties will have related responsibilities, such as protecting and safeguarding the information. Councillors may wish to check with municipal staff about appropriate measures and the municipality's practices. For example, providing physical security to help prevent unauthorized disclosure or loss of confidential information. Next slide, please. So the role of the school board trustee. The Education Act creates 4 different kinds of school boards. The English language public district school boards to govern the provisions of elementary and secondary English language instruction in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools. The English language separate district school boards to govern the provision of elementary and secondary English language instruction in Roman Catholic separate schools. The French language public district school boards to govern the provision of elementary and secondary French language instruction in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools, and the French language separate district school boards to govern the provision of elementary and secondary French language instruction in Roman Catholic separate schools. So school trustees are members of the school board. They are locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions and or concerns about their local school. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about duties, commitments, etc. Next slide, please. So the role of a school board trustee is to establish policy direction and participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, the Ministry of Education, and families. Next slide, please. So municipal office eligibility or ineligibility. So you must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as eligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you are qualified to hold that office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold the office. So please note the municipal clerk is responsible for setting up and running the voting places used in a municipal election. The clerk must comply with any provincial and local public health measures that are in effect and may also put in place additional procedures that they consider necessary for conducting the election. So if you have any questions about public health and safety in the polling place, you should contact your municipal clerk. Section 30 of the Municipal Elections Act states that a person shall not be considered an employee for this section by reason only of being a volunteer firefighter as defined in the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. So if a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. If elected, he or she shall be deemed to have resigned from the employment immediately before making the declaration of office. An employee of a municipality who wants to run for an office in a different municipality doesn't have to take a leave of absence or resign, but they should check with their employer to see if there's any policies that could affect them. Next slide, please. So school board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. Questions should be brought to the school about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. Now, this is important. If you are an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any school board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. So the following people are disqualified from being elected as a school trustee. You cannot be a clerk, deputy clerk, treasurer, or deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board. Any person not eligible to vote in the municipality. An employee of a school board unless they take an unpaid leave of absence and resign if elected. So also, just like being ineligible for municipal office, a judge of any court, a member of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, a senator, or a member of the House of Commons, an inmate of a penal or correctional institution under sentence of imprisonment. Next slide, please. So third-party advertisers. A third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate on a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. So third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing A, a candidate, or B, a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Next slide, please. So only the following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration. An individual who is normally a resident in Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. In the list of ineligibility, regarding item 5, any group or organization that is not a corporation, this includes groups like associations or clubs that are not incorporated. I will now hand over the next slide to my colleague, Caitlin.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. So nomination process. So the first day for filing nominations is May 1st of 2022. Please note that this is a Sunday, so unless the clerk has policies in place to permit electronic filing, candidates may have to wait until Monday, May 2nd, 2022 to file their nomination. The last day and time for filing nominations for the 2022 elections is on Friday, August 19th, 2022 by 2 p.m. The nomination filing fee is only refunded once the candidate submits a completed financial disclosure of all financial transactions made up to the date the nomination was withdrawn. The nomination date for a regular election is the fourth Friday in August in the year of the election, and it's in 2022, that is August 19th. Withdrawal of a nomination. So local election policies may state a candidate may personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate is in the hospital or incapacitated, this may not be feasible. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money nor raised any funds, they can click on the box and sign the form, and it is complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial auditor statements by the required deadline. An issue that is raised infrequently but is of importance nonetheless is what happens to a candidate which has been open and a candidate decides to run for a different office. Next slide, please. Thank you. So starting on May 1st until the close of business on August 19, 2022, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. May 1st is a Sunday, and you may not be able to file your registration until May 2nd when the clerk's office is open. Candidates must complete Form 1 nomination paper and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. As long as you are eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. Please note, in addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk may establish their own local processes and procedures related to submitting a nomination. So it is important to contact the clerk so you understand the process in your municipality. Electronic filing. The use of electronic filing for candidates and/or third-party advertisers is in the clerk's discretion. The clerk also has the authority to determine what methods could be used to file electronically. Councils do not have the authority to order the clerk to use electronic filing, and the clerk may permit a candidate or third-party advertiser to submit an electronic nomination at a time when the clerk's office is not open. So, for example, on a Friday evening. By establishing conditions and limits with respect to electronic filing, this allows the clerk to ensure that all of the requirements of the nomination have been met. filing fee, and endorsement signatures before the candidate or third-party advertiser's campaign period begins. Even if the clerk permits electronic filing, all campaign documents require original signatures, including signatures endorsing candidates' nominations where applicable. If electronic filing is permitted, it's the responsibility of the candidate or third-party advertiser to maintain these original records until after the next regular election in 2026. The first date that a candidate may file a nomination or a third-party advertiser may register is May 1st. Next slide, please. Thank you. The nomination process, 25 signatures required. So municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 signatures on Form 2. Please note forms for the 2022 municipal elections are available on the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. If you need more assistance, please reach out to your municipal clerk. Ontario Regulation 101-97 provides an exemption to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. Please note the requirement for nominators to sign nomination forms does not apply to school board candidates. Please refer to Section 33, subsection 1.1 of the Municipal Elections Act for more information. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just the ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could be held accountable under the penalty section of the Municipal Elections Act. Please note if the candidate wishes, they can provide more than 25 signatures. Candidates should remember that even if electronic filing is permitted, they are required to obtain 25 original signatures endorsing their nomination where applicable, and to keep those until after the next regular election in 2026. Next slide, please. Running for a different office. So occasionally a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can run for only one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and one or both offices are elected by the ward, the two campaigns must be kept separate and two financial statements must be filed. Next slide, please. Thank you. Registration of third-party advertisers. So individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertisers. There's no registration fee for third-party advertisers. A third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per Section 88.6, subsection 1 of the Municipal Elections Act. An individual, corporation, or trade union may, in person or by an agent, file with the clerk of the municipality responsible for conducting an election. A notice of registration to be registered third party for the election, and a notice must be filed in the prescribed form and must include a declaration of qualifications signed by the individual or by the representative of the corporation or trade union, as the case may be. In Section 88.6, subsection 2, a notice of registration may only be filed with the clerk of a local municipality. Once registered, they may advertise in support of or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in that municipality. This would include council, trustee, and directly elected upper tier candidates. To advertise regarding questions on the ballot will require registration as a third-party advertiser. For a regular election, the registration cannot be filed earlier than the first day for filing nominations and cannot be filed later than the Friday before voting day during the clerk's hours. Section 88.6, subsection 3 notes that once the clerk certifies the notice of registration, the individual, corporation, or trade union is a registered third party for the election. Third-party advertising is geographically based and is structured around the concept of influencing a specific set of voters in a specific location, i.e. the city of Kingston. Registering in the municipality where a third-party advertiser hopes to influence votes allows flexibility to support or advocate against any candidate in that specific geography. If a candidate wants to influence voters in more than one municipality, for example, over 3 municipalities covered in a specific school board trustee election, he or she would have to register in each of the 3 municipalities and conduct their activities as 3 separate campaigns. Section 88.7, if the municipality is satisfied that there has been a contravention of the act, i.e. advertising in the restricted period, as well as requirements there in sections 88.3, 88.4, or 88.5, then it can ask the third-party advertiser to remove the advertisement or discontinue the advertising. Next slide, please. Thank you. Third-party advertiser withdrawal. So the third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. This means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file their nomination. If a corporation or trade union is registered as a third party, it would not be affected by a person filing a nomination, as a person would not be the same entity. A third-party advertiser and a candidate would need to be careful to distance their activities, as third-party advertising may not take place under the direction of a candidate. The existing campaign finance rules would not change, and finances relating to a third-party advertising campaign cannot be transferred to a candidate's campaign. The existing campaign finance rules would not change, and a third-party advertiser who withdraws and closes their campaign cannot transfer that campaign to someone else. To maintain financial transparency around third-party advertising campaigns, the financial statements of advertisers who end their campaign early should reflect their finances as of the day their campaign ended. The registration period for third-party advertisers runs until the Friday before voting day, October 21st of 2022, or the last day the clerk's office is open before voting day in a by-election. Next slide, please. Thank you. Contributions. So campaign accounts are only required if a candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So for acclamations and campaigns where no funds are raised or spent, there is no need for a campaign account. Trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. Third-party advertisers will generally need to follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financial reporting as candidates for office. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. This must be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. This will encourage accountability and transparency so that you can ensure that you are aware of the municipality's policy in this regard. The practice of municipalities providing candidate contact information on their website is not a contribution. And please note, generally the contribution rules will apply to third-party advertiser campaigns as to candidates. Refer to both when the rules applies to both. The following amount are contributions. An amount charged for an admission to a fundraising function. If goods and services are sold for more than their market value at a fundraising function, the difference between the amount paid and the market value. However, if the amount received for the goods or services is $25 or less, the amount is not a contribution. If goods or services used in the person's election campaign or in relation to third-party advertisements are purchased for less than their market value, the difference between the market value and the amount paid. And lastly, an unpaid guaranteed balance in respect of a loan under section 88.17 of the Municipal Elections Act. Next slide, please. Thank you. Contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified. If one corporation controls the others or directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. If the corporations are controlled or owned by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. Next slide, please. Volunteers. So the value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. Please take note of this next few bullets because we've been asked a few questions about this. So a professional, i.e. an accountant or a lawyer, volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid. The market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and is a campaign expense. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. There's no rule that a candidate, family member, or campaign staff cannot contribute to a third-party advertiser. However, it is a potential optics issue. Caroline, I believe we're going to be taking a 5-minute break now.
Yes, that's correct. So we'll just take a 5-minute break now and we'll be back at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I do have 8 o'clock on my watch. So Carol, if you're ready to go, can I continue sharing?
Go to the next slide, please.
Okay, I will change screens.
I'm going to wait till the slide's on. All right, so I believe we're now going to the next slide. Contributions. All right. So campaign contributions are monies, goods, and services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. Fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. So receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name and address of the contributor and the amount and date. Next slide, please. So the limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200, except for City of Toronto mayoral candidates, in which case the amount is $2,500. The individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to the contributors. Next slide, please. Yeah. Self-funding limits. Self-funding limit for municipal council candidates based on the number of electors voting for the office to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. The formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council and $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for other council offices. The highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is $25,000. So if the formula works out to a number that's over $25,000, they still get the $25,000 limit. If the formula works out to less than $25,000, then they get whatever the formula works out to. Next slide, please. So borrowing. Loans can only be borrowed from a bank or other recognized lending institution in Ontario and must be directed into the campaign account. Loans may only be guaranteed by the candidate or their spouse. Generally, the same borrowing rules apply to third-party advertisers. So while candidates can open their account with their own funds, the candidate cannot loan funds to his or her campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. The only way that a candidate can reclaim the startup amount is after the election campaign period ends and prior to filing the financial statement. The candidate or his or her spouse may be refunded any contributions from surplus. You can't receive a loan from family members or from any corporate accounts that you may have access to. The loan isn't considered to be campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and the campaign does not repay all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since the guarantor is basically providing the campaign the means to repay the loan. Keep in mind the contribution limit for the candidate and spouse if borrowing. Any interest that the campaign pays on the loan is a campaign expense. Next slide, please. So campaign expenses. So what are expenses? The replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and used in the current election. The value of contributions of goods and services, audit and accounting fees, interests on loans under section 88.17, the cost of holding fundraising functions, the cost of holding parties and other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. For a candidate, expenses relating to a recount or a proceeding under section 83. Expenses relating to a compliance audit. Expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third party who is an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expense relate. The cost of election campaign advertisements, and that's within the meaning of section 88.3, or third-party advertisements, as the case may be. So for greater certainty, the cost of holding fundraising functions does not include costs related to events or activities that are organized for such purposes as promoting public awareness of a candidate, and at which the soliciting of contributions is incidental, or B, promoting materials in which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. Next slide, please. So candidates and third-party advertisers should become familiar with campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf during his or her campaign, or by a third-party advertiser during their campaign. The nomination filing fee is no longer an expense and is not included on the financial disclosure form. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses and must be reported. A receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only nominated persons and/or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during their campaign period. Payment of any campaign expense must be drawn from the campaign account, and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. All expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form to be filed with the clerk by the candidate or the third-party advertiser. So with respect to campaign inventory, if you ran in the last election and you want to use the leftover goods such as signs or office supplies, you have to determine what the current market value for those goods is and what it would cost you if you were to purchase them today. These amounts are recorded as an expense. Conversely, if you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign and it becomes your personal property, but if you want to store them to use in another election, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. Next slide, please. The spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 101-97. So the clerk calculates the spending limits twice. First, upon a candidate filing the nomination form, the clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voting lists as it existed on September 15, 2018. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it exists on September 15, 2022. And please note, this calculation must be provided to candidates on or before September 25, 2022. Whichever number is higher is the spending limit, and the clerk's calculation is final. Next slide, please. So clerks will continue to provide estimates of the spending limit. Dates have been slightly amended with transition dates for the 2018 election. Candidates will be required to inform their contributors of the contribution limits. So that's how much a contributor can contribute to an individual's a candidate's campaign, and the aggregate limit on contributions to any one council or local board election. The spending limit is to be provided by September 25th. If a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limits. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. So they're subject to the same contribution limits and have calculated spending limits. This includes financial filing requirements, requests for extensions, and records. Third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contribution and expenses are tracked and accounted for. Proper record retention, proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses or accepting contributions on their behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. Next slide, please. So most expenses are subject to the spending limit. Those listed in the slide aren't. So these are expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. So similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information to make campaign contributions doesn't qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit if incurred before voting day are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. I'll hand over the next slide.
Thank you, Carol. So third-party advertisers spending limits. So third-party advertisers will be subject to two spending limits, a general spending limit and a separate limit for expenses related to parties and expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides the following formula for calculating third-party spending limits: $5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of $25,000. The formula is used is based on the number of electors entitled to a vote in an election in the municipality. The Municipal Elections Act also provides that the spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day be set at 10% of the general spending limit. This would be consistent with the spending limit in place for candidates. Next slide, please. Thank you. Please take note of the next few slides. I find we get a lot of questions on these, so just pay attention, I guess, of these ones. So campaign finance rules. So as a candidate or third-party advertiser, it is important that you will be fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. A question we are asked each municipal election is whether there is a requirement for every candidate to have a chief financial officer, and the answer is no. We suggest that you familiarize yourself with sections 88.8 to 88.21 of the Municipal Elections Act and also the financial statements that you will be required to file. This will help guide you in organizing your records and how they have to be reported. You are required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records and open a campaign bank account if you're spending any money or accepting any contributions. Please note, a bank account is not required if a candidate or third-party advertiser does not receive nor spend any money. Next slide, please. Thank you. Candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all the campaign financial records until after November 15th, 2026, when a new council takes office. These rules apply whether you are elected or not. Next slide, please. Thank you. As a best practice, candidates and third-party advertisers should store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or his or her designate. It is good practice to have a receipt that is a multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially numbered. Please open a bank account which provides monthly statements and cancel checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit listing the names of the contributors and the amounts received from each. Maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses and obtain invoices to support all payments from the fund. At any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the original amount of the petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by a check drawn on the campaign account in an equal amount to the total amount of the invoices. Candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look over Form 4 candidates and Form 8 third-party advertisers, respectively, at the beginning of their campaign to give them an idea of what information will be needed to report on at the end of their campaign. Requirements under the Municipal Election Act to maintain records is until November 15th of 2023. Next slide, please. Campaign advertisements. So the period for third-party advertisements, as shown on the slide, is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers applies. In 2022, that is from May 1st of 2022, and then the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. Please note that third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. Please refer to sections 88.3 for candidates and 88.4 for third-party advertisers in the Municipal Elections Act for more information. Next slide, please. I think the slide is frozen on my end, but I'll just keep going. So, or maybe she already changed it. I think she changed it. Okay, yeah. So, the campaign advertisements continued. So the broadcaster or publisher of a third party or candidate advertisement shall maintain records containing the following information for a period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears and shall permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. A name of the candidate, registered third-party advertiser, the name or business address and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or publisher under the direction of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, a copy of the advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection, and lastly, a statement of the charge made for its appearance. Next slide, please. Thank you. So financial statements. Again, please take note of these slides. They're very important. Under section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act, all candidates are required to file Form 4 with the clerk, regardless of how much or how little they spent or fundraised. If you file the nomination form, you must file a Form 4. This form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or were acclaimed. If you are registered as a third-party advertiser, you must complete Form 8. A candidate may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. The clerk is required to make a public report of which candidates filed financial statements and which did not. Next slide, please. Thank you. The appointment of an auditor by the candidate is mandatory if expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. An auditor must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act 2004. Please note that the campaign statements are public documents. Next slide, please. Thank you. Candidates can file their financial documents at any time after voting day to January 3rd, adjusted from December 31st as it falls on a Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expenses incurred. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligation and publish that report on the municipal website or in any other electronic form. This needs to be done by April 30th in the case of regular election or with 90 days of a regular by-election. Clerks can determine the conditions for the electronic filing of financial statements. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Carol to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so financial statements continued. The nomination fee is only refundable if the financial statement is filed on time. A candidate third-party advertiser who misses the filing deadline may file within the 30-day grace period, provided a $500 late filing fee is paid to the municipality. So please note that a candidate who chooses to file within the 30-day grace period will be subject to both the $500 late filing fee as well as the loss of their nomination refund. A candidate third-party advertiser may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. Next slide, please. So surpluses, we get a lot of questions on this, so please listen. So when filing the financial statement, a candidate or third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. So prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if in a case of an individual, made to the campaign and not to anyone else. The amount that may be refunded is the lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. So the clerk is required to place surplus monies in trusts for use by the candidate if they need it for a compliance audit. The clerk is required to place surplus money in trust for use by the third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. If neither the candidate nor third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it then becomes the property of the municipality or school board. Next slide, please. So every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. Members of the compliance audit committee cannot be members of the council or school board, an employee, a candidate in the election, or a registered third-party advertiser. Clerks are to review contributions and to prepare a report for consideration by the Compliance Audit Committee if a contributor appears to have exceeded any contribution limits. This process is related to reviewing contributions as reported on the financial statements and is not connected to the compliance audit process. If it is apparent to the clerk that a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee, which would meet to determine whether to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify what details are to be provided in the report to the committee. Electors entitled to vote in an election may apply for a compliance audit even if the candidate has not filed a financial statement. The application must be in writing, and set out the electors' reasons for why they believe the Municipal Elections Act has been contravened. The application must be submitted to the municipal clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of the filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee will consider the application and decide whether to retain an auditor to undertake a compliance audit of the candidate's financial return. Next slide, please. So the Compliance Audit Committee is required to provide brief written reasons for its decision. Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. Electors can apply for a compliance audit of a third-party advertiser's campaign finances. The minister has the authority to make a regulation setting out qualifications for Compliance Audit Committee members. So under subsection 8833, subsection 8, the written reasons for the committee's decisions shall be given to the candidate, the clerk with whom the candidate filed his or her nomination, the secretary of the local board, if applicable, and the applicant. If an audit occurs, the report must be circulated to the same individuals. The audit committee will consider the auditor's report. So if the compliance audit determines that there's been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to proceed with legal action. Decisions of the committee may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Elections Act may proceed with legal action without having first obtained a compliance audit. So next slide, please. Okay, so it is an offense to an offense described in subsection 3 constitutes a corrupt practice, and a person who commits it is on conviction disqualified from voting at all election until the next regular election has taken place after the election to which the offense relates, in addition to being liable to any other penalty provided for in this act. So no person shall directly or indirectly offer, give, lend, or promise or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Advance, pay, or cause to be paid money intending that it be used to commit an offense referred to in Clause A, or knowing that it will be used to repay money used in that way. Give, procure, or promise or agree to procure an office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Apply for, accept, or agree to accept any valuable consideration or office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. And finally, give, procure, or promise or agree to procure an office or employment to induce a person to become a candidate, refrain from becoming a candidate, or withdraw his or her candidacy. Next slide, please. So this chart provides the penalties for individuals, candidates, and third-party advertisers. The ineligibility to vote is a penalty if you are convicted of a corrupt practice, and you should refer to Municipal Elections Act, Section 90. Next slide, please. So, voters list. The preliminary list of electors, as corrected by the clerk, becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their name and information corrected or added to or removed from the voters list. The clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that the person has died. So under section 23, the clerk shall not provide a copy of the voters list under subsection 3 or a part of the voters list under subsection 4 until September 1st. Next slide, please. So candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the name of the electors entitled to vote for that office. So the clerk shall provide a copy of the voters list to the secretary of the school board, the clerk of the municipality responsible for conducting the school board elections for the area, upper tier clerks if members are required to be elected at an election conducted by the clerk or that has submitted a bylaw or question to the electors, and candidates. Now, next slide, please. So the clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of the list to sign a receipt acknowledging the list is only to be used for election purposes, and any other use would be in violation of the Municipal Elections Act. An elector's name shall appear only once on the list. In a ward system, an elector is entitled to vote only in the ward where he or she resides. Next slide, please. So voting proxy, there are a number of reasons why someone would appoint someone else to vote on their behalf, including the absence from the area, illness, something like that. In section 44 of the Municipal Elections Act, the issuance, information on the issuance of proxy forms can be read. So no appointments until all nominations are closed. The clerk may designate a place and time for presentation of proxy voting application and appointment forms for clerk's certification. On days of advance vote, the clerk's office or another location may be designated and open from noon to 5 p.m. Assignment of proxy vote is the responsibility of an eligible voter to appoint an identified eligible voter. So an eligible proxy may exercise only one proxy vote, unless the proxy is acting on behalf of a spouse, sibling, parent, child, grandparent, or grandchild. Proxy forms must have original signatures. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Carol. I'll continue. Thank you.
you.
No problem. I was like, you can finish it if you want. So, scrutineers. So only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election where votes taking place at a poll, the deputy returning officer is in charge of the activity in the voting place, and the DRO may ask the scrutineer to leave if the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Candidates/scrutineers should respect that the DRO must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Councils and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of the results. Next slide, please. Again, this is a really important slide. It's the key dates. So again, take some notes with this slide. So voting day is Monday, October 24th of 2022 between 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes and institutions, or council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. Please refer to section 46 of the Municipal Elections Act for more information. The campaign period, the time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses, runs from the date that the nomination is submitted up until January 3rd of 2023. The campaign period, the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date their registration is certified. Earliest date is May 1st of 2022 until January 3rd of 2023. The deadline for the filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Friday, March 31st of 2023, no later than 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement regardless of how much they spent or received in contributions. Again, you'll see that nominations are opening on May 1st. We highly suggest to do them earlier rather than later. Next slide, please. So resources. So the first link will take you to the eLaws website where all provincial legislation is available online, including the associated regulations. You may want to be familiar with the Municipal Elections Act 1996, the Municipal Elections, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act, and if running for a school board, the Education Act. The second link is to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. From this site, you will be able to access the 2022 Voters Guide, Candidates Guide, and the Third-Party Advertisers Guide. Once on the Municipal World website, if you click on the icon Bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office. They are also available to purchase online. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if you have more questions, I would highly suggest to reach out to your municipal advisor, Jane Parnell, at jane.parnell@ontario.ca, or your applicable municipal clerk. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
So thank you very much, Carol and Caitlin, for that presentation. I'm just gonna share my screen again to provide the number where anyone interested in asking a question following your presentation, so now can call in. If Caitlin or Carol, you can just give me a heads up if you can see that slide.
Yes.
Yep, you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, great. So just to reiterate, if there's anyone watching from the public that would like to ask a question today, please feel free to email us now at elections@orangeville.ca, or you can call us at 1-289-801-5774, conference ID 183-915-984, hashtag. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to give it just maybe a minute just to see if any calls come in. There may be a bit of a lag in terms of the broadcast, so we'll just give it a minute. Following, I'll just leave these details on the screen. Following today, however, we do encourage anyone with any questions related to your particular municipality to contact your local municipal office, and I will be posting the URLs, the addresses for the websites for each of the municipalities following this. And please feel free to reach out to them with any municipal specific questions. Alternatively, as Caitlin mentioned, you can also reach out to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for any broader election-related questions. So I'll just, I don't see any questions coming in. Mona, would you mind just confirming that there is nothing? No calls coming in?
There is no callers on the line at this point.
Okay, and Tracy, if you wouldn't mind just confirming if anything has come in via email?
Carolina, nothing through email either.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I'll just move on to sharing the contact information for the Dufferin County local municipal offices. It is their website addresses, so please feel free to get the contact information from there. And this is just a plug for 2 candidate information sessions that are coming up. The next one on will be this month, and then there will be another one in May. This is so you want to run for council. This presentation will be delivered in person by Fred Dean, who is a municipal expert and will be discussing roles and responsibilities of elected members of council. So should be a very good presentation if you're able to come out on Tuesday, April 19th. It will be taking place from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Tony Rose Memorial Sports Center in Orangeville. The address is on the screen. And then the second opportunity to see the presentation will also be in person, and it will take place on Thursday, May 5th, 2022, between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. In Shelburne, and the address is on the screen. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your local municipal office. Website's on the screen. Alternatively, I would just like to thank our presenters today, Carol and Caitlin. Thank you very much for attending on behalf of all of the Dufferin County municipalities, and thank you to those who were listening in. Thank you and have a good night. are we offline?